Confession time. I wasn't a big fan of Violet Bridgerton at the start of the show. I found her a bit boring and thought that Portia Featherington was a way more interesting character than her. What can I say? I have a thing for unlikable women in stories and fiction, especially when they are women who act and do what they can to exist and survive in a world I would rather see them defeated. And Violet Bridgerton, who seemed like she was brimming with such goodness and kindness, was a bit vanilla to me. And although she is still vanilla and still has that goodness and is kind, she eventually grew on me. I, however, still despaired over her obsession with finding love matches for her children and couldn't understand why she was so focused on it, especially when it sometimes seemed to be something her children didn't want. Like, ignore the fact that they eventually did come to love their partners and got those love matches that she wanted. As that when she was actively pushing for their marriages, they didn't want that. And as a Nigerian girl who has had many a relative harping about me getting married, even though I had made it quite clear that I am not interested, seeing her refusal to respect her children's boundaries with regards to their wishes always frustrated me. But I eventually grew to accept it. After all, what she seemed to want was her children getting the chance at the great love story she had with Edmund before he died, right? Like, who wouldn't want that? But then with how the story played out in season 3 and I saw how she was so obviously against John Sterling, even with Francesca's insistence that she loved him and she wanted her mother's approval of her choice, I went back to being frustrated. It made no sense to me when it was pretty obvious that these two kids were perfect for each other. Why couldn't she see it? But then, it finally clicked for me. The actual reason why Violet Bridgerton is obsessed with her children getting love matches isn't just because she wants them to have the grand love story and marriage she had with their father. No. It's because she doesn't want them to have the miserable marriage of her father. And that has made a ton of difference for me in understanding her better. Want to learn more? Well then, keep watching. Now, the one word that always resonated with me when I think of Violet Bridgerton is love. It is clearly something that is central to her character, whether we are considering her love for her children, her love for her late husband Edmund, the love she has for Lady Danbury, who has now become quite a good friend to her, a blossoming love for Lady Danbury's brother Marcus, or her love for her father. Love is important to Violet, and the show drives that truth further in with every chance it gets. And for the longest time, I was confused about why love should matter to her so much. Like, don't get me wrong, love is beautiful, and Bridgerton is a romance set within the world of a somewhat alternate history England, yes, but a romance nonetheless. If you're someone who is watching Bridgerton and doesn't love romance or the idea of love, then maybe you're watching the wrong show and should consider an alternative. But back to what I was saying, love is lovely and beautiful, but at the same time, I couldn't understand why Violet was so insistent on it. Women of her time weren't as focused on love. They often echoed Portia Featherington's words of the best thing to look for being security, and personally, I resonated more with that take. Love could be fleeting. It brings its highs and can easily bring you down to the lows. And most importantly, love isn't forever, as we see clearly in Violet's case. No matter how much she loved her husband, that love couldn't prevent him from being stung by that bee that then led to his death from the allergic reaction he got to the bee sting. So I was curious about why she was so stuck on it. She's admitted to Anthony that she and Edmund had their ups and downs in their marriage, so clearly her marriage wasn't all roses. And she also admitted to Colin that her relationship with Edmund started as a friendship before it eventually grew into love. So clearly, she knew from personal experience that not every love was at first sight. Sometimes it takes time to grow. Sometimes starting as friends is good, especially for the era they were in. So it made no sense to me why she would then have a problem with Francesca and John's relationship in season 3. Couldn't she see that their friendship was at the core of their love? Couldn't she see how comfortable and happy and at ease they were with each other? Was there something more that she saw that we couldn't as the audience? And so I kept thinking about it, and I've been processing it since season 3 dropped. And in my many rewatches of the season since, I finally arrived at the realization, late though I might have been to the party, Violet Bridgerton is a daddy's girl who grew up in a household where her parents had contrasting interests and beliefs and barely tolerated each other. It does a lot to a young girl whose father was a hero and could do no wrong. Lord Ledger acknowledged her smarts, called her brains as a nickname, never shut her down or up like her mother did, and celebrated her. And she had to look at this man who meant the world to her. And as she grew up, probably came to the realization that although Lord Ledger meant the world to her, it didn't mean the world to her mother, which made him miserable and turned her into a shrew. And as a daddy's girl, that is something she cannot abide with. And it is this thought process that she carries for the rest of her life and into the show, to make sure that her children's marriages don't reflect the absolute failure that was her parents' marriage. She is desperate for them to find partners who think the world of them and mean the world to them. And so when she doesn't see that, she fights against the match. And you see this clearly with all her kids and their matches. With Daphne and the prince in season 1, it went beyond her not approving of the fact that Daphne very obviously doesn't love the prince. She's also concerned that he doesn't love her back either. And sure, he might be royalty, a nephew to their queen, and Daphne would have the chance to become a princess, which my dear baby girl Hyacinth finds absolutely thrilling and delightful. Violet doesn't care as much about this though. Her daughter's happiness is priority for her, and based off of her parents' marriage, she knows the consequences of being married and shackled to someone who isn't on the same wavelength with you, who doesn't share your ideals or interests, and who doesn't think the world of you or mean the world to you, who isn't your friend. She foresaw a future where Daphne becomes Violet's own father, biting her tongue and holding things back because although she doesn't agree with what is being said, she doesn't want to rock the boat or speak out of turn. And this would be even worse were Daphne to become the Parisian princess. It's why she preferred Simon, and why even after Daphne admits to her that they've been play acting all this while and it was all a farce to boost Daphne's appeal and get her more suitors after Anthony's attempted sabotage, Violet still firmly believed that Simon was the best choice for her daughter. And it is why she was absolutely delighted when Daphne broke the news that she and Simon were engaged and wanted to get married. Because to her, there is no way a prince would make Daphne the center of his world. But Simon, however, can, and from what she could see, most likely did. And she knows her daughter well enough to see that that feeling is reciprocal. And the same applied to Anthony as well. Although it was very obvious that Edwina thought the world of Anthony, Anthony, however, didn't do the same. She noticed all season long that Anthony seemed to approach the entire process of him wanting a wife from a purely transactional perspective. He had a list he wanted to have his future wife meet, and the minute Edwina was declared the season's diamond by the queen, Anthony concluded that that meant she met and exceeded the basic requirements, and so she would do as a wife. Violet in that situation most likely reasoned that it seemed more like what would lead to the kind of marriage her parents had rather than what she had with Edmund. Unlike with Daphne, where she was present for a lot of her interactions with Simon and could see how she and Simon revolved around each other, Violet didn't really see that with Anthony and Edwina and was rightfully worried that he was about to make a big mistake. And when he admitted that the reason why he wasn't looking for a great love was because he didn't want his wife to shatter the way Violet did after Edmund passed, she was devastated. After the dinner with the Sheffield, however, when it was revealed that they had set aside a trust for Edwina, but only if she'd married an English nobleman, Violet used the opportunity to bring up that she could clearly see that Anthony wasn't excited or happy about the upcoming marriage and asked him to break the engagement so he doesn't have any regrets. In this case, she didn't want Anthony to become her father, trapped in a marriage with a woman he doesn't love who doesn't make him excited and happy. And because she's also aware of how unhappy her mother was in that marriage, she most likely doesn't want the same for Edwina either. Now, unlike with Simon and Daphne, when she saw the two of them interact and could spot the attraction, she didn't spend enough time with Anthony and Kate together, and so she didn't have instances where she could see them together. Because if she had that view the way Daphne did, then she definitely would have urged Anthony to get with Kate instead, the way Daphne did. Although a part of me does think that the reason why it was so easy for Daphne to spot it was because she spent her season pretending to be in love with Simon until she then fell in love with Simon, whilst at the same time devoting her time to Prince Frederick because she didn't think Simon reciprocated her feelings. So one can say she's quite familiar with the tangled mess of emotions that are quite possible when you're resisting attraction and your emotions. With Colin and Penelope, things were a bit different. Although we never got instances of Violet in previous seasons being shown to have noticed Penelope's love for Colin, or at least I don't think so. If any of you all saw that happen prior to season 3, please let me know in the comments, because I did comb through my memories and did a rewatch of some of the episodes and came up with zilch. But as I was saying, we don't really see Violet notice Pen's love for Colin. But it's pretty clear to everyone that Pen and Colin are very good friends, which is the barest minimum for Violet in her children's love matches. Then you take it a step further and take into account that all of the Bridgertons are aware that Colin exchanges letters with Penelope on his travels, and that she's actually the only one who responds actively to his letters. And you can make the deduction that Violet is not only delighted that Pen, who is being like an honorary daughter to her since she became best friends with her second daughter, is marrying into their family, but also that Pen, who clearly thinks the world of Colin and who Colin means the world to, is the one that Colin chooses to marry. Do I think that the reverse is the case? That Colin thinks the world of Pen? Well, at the end of season 3, yes. Maybe. I'm still processing how the writers handled Paul in this last season. I'm sorry. But looking at how Violet has had such an active interest in all the pairings and matches of her kids so far, and now it's pretty clear she doesn't want them repeating her parents' mistakes, it makes her refusal to see John Sterling as a possible suitor and a good match for Francesca until the tail end of the season stand out more to me. Like a sore thumb of sorts, because like I said earlier in this video, I was convinced that Violet could see the strong friendship that Francesca had with John. How she seemed to bloom in his presence, her happy smiles and contented silence. It didn't make sense to me that what we, the viewers, could clearly see as love, a different look and expression of it, sure, but love nonetheless, wasn't seen and acknowledged by Violet Bridgerton. She who is love personified in the show and whose character trait for the longest time was just the one who loves love. Until we got further into the show and the story, and now we are seeing more of her identity outside of devoted and loving widow and mother. Could not see the love that we all could see. And then it hit me. Just in case you all couldn't tell, I keep getting hit with so many epiphanies when watching this show. Probably what I get for doing a ton of rewatches. But as I was saying, it hit me. The reason why she couldn't see it is because Francesca and John's love hit Violet's sore spot. Their silence. What do I mean? Here is the thing. If you go back and rewatch Queen Charlotte and look through the instances where Lord Ledger and Vivian Ledger are in the same room together, you will notice a heightened amount of silence. Vivian complains about their new queen, about Princess Augusta giving instructions for her to be attended to by the women of the landed gentry, about giving the people of color titles and bringing them into the peerage, about Lady Danbury being the first to give the ball of the season, about Violet not behaving herself and staring at the queen at the ball throne in celebration of the birth of George IV. All Vivian Ledger does is complain. And all Lord Ledger does is sit in silence, not responding to her words, except for when it pertains to their daughter and a disapproval of Violet's choices and actions. That's when Lord Ledger speaks. But other than that, all he does is maintain his silence. That silence for him is a mark of disapproval to what his wife is saying and a mark of him being resigned to the marriage that he now regrets. And I do think there's a very high chance and probability that Violet has grown to associate silence with her father shrinking into himself and regretting his life choices on whom he chose as his bride and the mother of his daughter. And so rather than see Francesca and John's silence as this beautiful thing that they share, where they are each other's calm place and port in a storm, she instead is reminded of the many times her father has had to keep quiet in the face of her mother's irritating company. Silence meant that the passion and love had died out for her parents' marriage, and all they were doing was tolerating each other. And she didn't want that for Francesca. It took Francesca insisting on her love for John and Violet having to step out of herself and realize that love does come in different forms for this to finally click for her. I think it goes beyond just Violet wanting a love that reminds her of her love with Edmund and how it was this all-consuming love, and that being the kind of love that she wants for her kids. Because yes, I do agree that that's part of it, but it also extends to her not wanting her kids to have to experience the kind of marriage that her parents had. And that is what makes me a bit more forgiving of Violet, and it contributed to me liking her a bit more. Because to me, her character is driven by more than her wanting her children to have what she had, which is good, by the way. Most parents want their kids to have good things. But it also goes to her not wanting her kids to experience the bad that she had to grow up in. And that lends an added layer of understanding for me about why she's such a big advocate for love matches. And why, after trying her best to introduce Eloise to noble men that she could connect to and have shared interests with, and realize that they were bad matches for her daughter, she was just as quick to step away and promise Eloise that she wouldn't meddle anymore, nor is she a disappointment like Eloise feared. And I think it's why she was able to tell Francesca that she now knew there were many versions of love thanks to her and John, and she thanked her for showing her that. Because sure, their love might not have the burning, fiery passion of her love with Edmund, but it wasn't the cold, resigned, dissatisfied one of her parents. And to Violet Bridgerton, that matters a lot. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Hit the like button if you do, hit the dislike button if you don't. Like I always say, the choice with regards how you interact with my content is yours. If you'd like to leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Violet Bridgerton and her matchmaking driven ways, please do so. Share this video if you think others should hear what I have to say. It does help my channel grow and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my patrons. You all keep me going and help me pay my bills and keep the lights on. Thank you. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, the link to do so is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week. Mondays are for my anime content, Wednesdays are for movies and TV shows, Fridays are for anything else really. All my videos drop at 5 p.m. EST on upload days. Whilst you wait for new content from me, do check out my Eloise Bridgerton Isn't a Feminist Icon, She's One of the Boys video. And until my next video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.